Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us from around the world. Bienvenue a tous et merci beaucoup d'être ici avec nous. Bienvenidos a todos y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you to Zinnov Confluence Europe Edition. My name is Natalia Bilbao, and I will be your host for today with the overarching theme, Reboot, Reimagine, Empowering a Net Zero Future. Today's sessions will deep dive into reimagining the way we work, keeping a net zero future at the core. We promise you, with the stellar lineup of speakers we have in store today, the next 2.5 hours will leave you with plenty of food for thought. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we have lined up for you today. The first half of the conference features keynote speakers who will explore how to reframe business strategies and equip workforces to enable net zero. The second half will address how to explore human potential and create sustainable business models. We will also understand the role of sustainability in the development of 6G technology, very impressive. To help answer some of these fascinating questions, we have with us an exciting lineup of speakers from industry veterans, sustainability champions, and of course, trailblazing leaders. So before we get started with the sessions, I would like to let everyone know that we'll be running some polls throughout, so keep an eye out for these pop-up alerts, and we look forward to you participating in them. Also, if you have any issues whatsoever, feel free to drop us a note at events@zinnov.com or send a message in the chat section that's below of your screen, and someone from the Zinnov team will assist you. All right, folks, so let's get the show on the road, as the rock stars say. I'd like to invite Manali Devamik, Engagement Manager at Zinnov, to give a brief introduction about what we can expect for the day. Manali, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalia. Hi, I'm Manali Devamik, Engagement Manager at Zinnov, and I'd like to welcome everyone today to Zinnov Confluence, the Europe chapter. Today, we will explore how to reimagine and empower a net zero future. Over the last 14 years, Confluence has become one of the biggest platforms for global leaders from technology and business to deliberate, exchange ideas and best practices, and share knowledge about the latest technology, market, and leadership trends. In this edition, we are focusing on the winning strategies, technologies, and approaches adopted by industry leaders, decision makers, and policy makers to take a more comprehensive path to sustainability and achieve net zero emissions, making way for a sustainable economy. But what is the net zero ecosystem, and how do we build this future? Net zero is achieved when the amount of greenhouse gases produced is equivalent to the amount removed from the atmosphere. Practically, we can achieve net zero only when what we add is less than what we remove. The UK is one of the world's first major economies to set a target of being net zero by 2050. This is the beginning of a sustainable future. How can leaders from the technology ecosystem help drive a sustainable future? What role can we as a collective play in enabling a net zero future? To explore technologies driving decarbonization towards a sustainable future, we have an exciting lineup of sessions coming up over the course of the next 2.5 hours. Let's meet the leaders and thinkers driving this change to help achieve a net zero future. We start with a keynote talk by Siddhant Vastogi, Managing Partner at Zinnov, who will talk about how companies and leaders can reboot and reimagine their strategies and business models to empower a net zero future. We next have Vijay Swaminathan, the CEO of Drop, who will take us through the journey of how we can build sustainable workforces while working towards net zero emissions. One of the most advanced technologies that will enable a sustainable future is 6G. In fact, the 6G era can be defined as the conglomeration of digital, physical, and biological worlds with the goal to elevate human productivity and humans. Dr. Volker Ziegler, Leadership 6G Labs at Nokia, will talk about unleashing the human potential, focusing on how 6G can aid sustainable futures. We then have a coffee chat session with Yana Bodzatu, Head of Corporate Social Responsibility at Society Generali Global Solutions Center, India and Romania, and Melanie Chapman, Global Workforce Partner, Environmental Management, AXA, along with our very own Amit Kulkarni, partner at Zinnov, who will deliberate on profit and planet sustainability as a business model. After the coffee chat, we have a panel discussion on digital decarbonization, accelerating sustainability through digital technologies with Frederick Murray, Faurecia Zero Emissions, Patrick Dankers, Head of Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility Europe Ericsson, and Jeremy Gibson, Senior Architect Air Liquide, moderated by Vimal Menon, Partner and GM, Zinnov SAS. And finally, the last session of the day will focus on eco-anxiety and how youth can be brought to the forefront of the climate conversation. As an activist herself, Phoebe Hansen works to mobilize youth in solutions to climate change. Well, that's what we have in store for you today. Hope you take away some much needed food for thought around sustainability and a net zero future that will empower you to realign your own business strategies. Thank you once again. Let me now invite Siddhant to deliver the keynote speech. Over to you, Siddhant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Paris edition of the Zinnov Confluence series. Today, I'm very excited to present our point of view on the topic of sustainability. This, as we all know and agree, is undoubtedly the gravest challenge that our species is facing today. At the same time, I have immense belief in our ability to work together and address this issue. As we move to my opening slide, let me start with a very powerful quote from Bill Gates in his book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster, which I think is a seminal publication which talks very clearly around our role and the role of corporates and the government around this area. The book captures two important numbers. The first one is 51 and the second one is 0. We emit 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases every year, and we need to get to 0, period. That is the target that we have for our human race. At the same time, getting to net zero is quite a task. It's not going to be easy. It means that we have to transform multiple aspects in our modern life. Nearly all the sectors of our economy need to transform in some way or the other. But if we understand the problem and develop solutions working together, I'm sure we can definitely win. As we move on, one of the things we will discuss is, we'll just take a pause and look at where we are currently on the next slide. The per capita carbon dioxide emission of the world is about 4.5 metric tons. And as you can see, most of the developed nations emit a lot more than the average. At the same time, some countries stand out for how they have been doing well already. For example, France has a very low emission per capita, mainly attributable to its low reliance on fossil fuels for electricity. Currently, more than a third of the global electricity is generated from renewable sources, and every major economy is dedicated to ensuring that the focus is going to move away or getting into generating electricity without emitting a lot of carbon dioxide. UK, I think, is doing one of the most commendable jobs by committing to 100% energy production from renewables. As we move to the next slide, one of the things that has been very heartening to see over the last few weeks is the way the global community came together in the Glasgow conference, climate change conference. And each of the leaders representing their countries has actually committed to significant amount of investment and also targets for a sustainable future. Two of them that really stand out is that 100 plus countries have put in a global methane pledge. What that means is they would slash methane emissions by 30%. 130 plus countries have pledged to halt and reverse deforestation, which I think just these two items put together at such a large scale is very reassuring. And it provides us with the hope that we are all going to collaborate to build a carbon net zero future. On my next slide, I want to talk about what enterprises are doing to help the cause. We at Zinnov, for the longest of time, have been tracking the top 1,000 R&D spenders across the world globally, within multiple sectors, about 20 plus sectors. What we did recently was look at the top 100 firms, and there is a very clear and secular trend of these enterprises investing towards a carbon net zero future. Firms have dedicated billions of dollars with very clear plans and timelines to achieve net zero. Let me give you a couple of examples. Microsoft has announced that by 2030, it will get to carbon negative. By 2025, it will shift to 100% supply of renewable energy for its data centers, buildings, and campuses. And also, from an internal accountability perspective, the firm already charges what they call an internal carbon tax, which is a fee that each Microsoft division pays back to the corporate based on the amount of carbon emissions that their unit does. It has also committed to investing a full $1 billion towards Climate Innovation Fund. I know many of us in the audience are thinking, well, isn't it easy for Microsoft? They don't actually manufacture a physical product. There is no big energy consumption. And aren't they all just working from home anyway? The answer is yes. So let's look at an example from an industry where I think the problem or the solution to a green future is a little more complex than Microsoft. And I want to talk about Shell. Shell's target is to become net zero emissions energy business by 2050. And all of us here know what Shell does. It is not only an energy user. The whole process of creating the hydrocarbons that we consume is very energy intensive, but it is also an energy provider, which means that the company has to almost reimagine their business from scratch, the entire process of production, distribution, storage, etc. And it is not just a few small things here and there that can lead them to this. What is very heartening is the amount of commitment that they show towards this cause and the amount of money that is being put and the timelines that they have given around this. So what they're doing is they're not only going to obviously reduce the consumption across the production process, but they have also invested and committed to develop many more alternate and green energy sources, which the world can use as an alternate to more of the polluting fuels that we have. I believe strongly that it is a very brave decision from one of the largest corporates in the world, especially for a non-tech business, because many times it's very difficult to balance business targets and green goals, because green goals come at a cost, both CapEx and OpEx. We recently heard an unfortunate news about Danone CEO being asked to step down for what the public believe to have been a whole lot of passionate effort into getting into sustainable practices. So let me, as I move forward to my next slide, let me break down this problem and look at how or what are some of the biggest sources of today's global greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see, manufacturing is about 1/3 of the entire emission. The second is electricity. And then we have big chunks in agriculture, transportation, and buildings. Of course, to get to net zero, we have to work on all of them. And we have to ensure that we speed up the cycle of innovation to achieve this net zero. What this means is investing in research and development, creating market demand for clean technology, and also definitely designing public policy to support and encourage customers to adopt this. We have to really reimagine a lot of things that we do and how we look at them across these 5 challenges. Let me do a very simple pop quiz, and people can, type in the answer in the chat window. Just give me which of the following do you think has the most energy? 1, a stick of dynamite, 2, a hand grenade, and 3, a gallon of gasoline. And also, if you're in US, which of the following is the cheapest? A gallon of milk, a gallon of orange juice, or a gallon of gas? Right? I think most of you will get the right answer. It is definitely a gallon of gasoline. So when something is that cheap and has so much energy, however it is polluting, what does it take to get people off something that is so easily available and is so energy efficient in one sense, but is extremely polluting? Similarly, if you look at one of the bigger things, and I will talk about that a little more, is how do we make things better? 1 ton of cement production involves 1 ton of carbon dioxide emission. How do we plug in? Within 20 years, our energy demand is going to go up by 50%. How do we manage to produce cleaner fuels and cleaner electricity? How do we grow things? How do we cut emissions, especially when it comes to better processes for just agriculture? How do we live? Many of you would be surprised to know on the amount of building stock that comes up in this world. We actually add an entire New York City worth of building stock every month. That is the prediction is that we will continue to do this for the next 50 years. How are we going to deal with this amount of new change, growth, and also reducing carbon emissions? I'm sure this looks to be a very daunting task. Let me, in my next few slides, break it down a little more and figure out where we can start and what we can do. One of the things that you will see on the next slide is what we call green premium. This is again from the book of Bill Gates that I spoke about, which I believe is an excellent metric for most corporates to look at. And a green premium basically is the additional cost of choosing a clean product or practice or technology over something that is more polluting. It's very simple to understand. A green premium on any area helps us to measure the progress that we have made towards addressing these climate changes and understand where we are and the barriers we have to overcome. Of course, the target is to be lowering green premiums, in fact, to bring it as close to zero as possible so that the cost of switching becomes very, very easy. Right? And let me give you a good example. If you look at a gallon of jet fuel, it costs about $2.2. However, the same alternate biofuel, which is made from plant bioproducts, doesn't take as much energy to produce and is less polluting. On the other hand, costs $5.35, which, as you can see, is about 150% more. So what needs to be done is investment in some of these areas to ensure that a biofuel is much cheaper, right? And that is the kind of thing which I mentioned that companies like Shell are working towards. At the same time, different use cases in different sectors need to look at which areas, which products, which practices have a higher green premium and work specifically on innovating within those areas. And that is where the audience in this conference and the corporates have a responsibility to work towards and bring down the green premium through our consistent innovation. The other thing that is straightforward to be done is ensure that we are focused on the already zero carbon options which have a low switching cost or low green premiums. A good example is the zero carbon electricity in US. It is available. It is available at just about a 15% premium, and it is incumbent on us to encourage this additional spending in the interest of a better climate in the future. This can also be encouraged using government regulations, etc. But we believe that this is a straightforward thing for us to be done. The second, of course, like I mentioned, is innovate on areas which have high green premium. Cement, like I said, is one of the areas which is still really difficult to solve because it is not only the process of production of cement that produces carbon dioxide because of the high amount of energy it utilizes, but also the chemical process that are needed during the input of making cement that emit this carbon dioxide. So the only current way of, there is no clear alternate to cement, just as we are looking at biofuels versus jet fuel. So the only alternate is to use carbon capture technology, and carbon capture technology is available. A lot of companies, including the Honeywells and the Shells of the world, are working towards it. However, using that technology adds about 140% of cost onto a ton of cement. So what it means as corporates is we really need to work towards a better technology, better way of innovating on carbon capture technology and bringing this premium down. On my next slide, what I will do is I will talk about 6 very clear ways on how we can lower these green premiums and make the transition to zero carbon. First, of course, is innovation. We spoke about it a little bit. At the same time, one of the examples that we have been seeing for at least over a decade now is the massive amount of investment that the automotive sector has been doing in creating and electrifying their fleets. We all know about the commitments that these companies have made. And just that focus for the last more than 10 years has ensured that the cost of owning an electric vehicle, the operating an electric vehicle has been brought down significantly. So that is definitely one of the examples to emulate in every sector as we move down. The second area, which we have seen to have good real benefits, is the whole digitization of the manufacturing facilities, be it discrete or process. Each of the digitization steps ensures better traceability, better reuse, and lesser wastage. The third is green finance. There's a lot of talk around green finance. Green finance is where companies and investors really commit to buying cleaner alternatives, invest in R&D and cashing in on the same, supporting clean energy startups, advocating better government policies. The fourth, of course, is regulations and government policies that can help us move towards lower carbon emitting products. Finally, I want to talk about something that doesn't get spoken about often, and it is about how we as a person, as a family, and as a society behave. What behaviors we condone, what behaviors we foster, and what behaviors we demand. Just as in the battle of COVID, while scientists fight to find the best vaccine and cure, we as individuals and societies are changing our behavior. We are masking up, we are being socially cautious, etc. The same thing applies even to a green future. We have to take onus at our personal level. There's a very interesting quote that I came across which says that the most sustainable product is the one that you don't buy. It is actually true. If you look at the kind of things that we are used to, it's a big behavioral shift for us. Even the simplest of decisions of using less plastic, paying the premium for, say, an electric car, or buying from a green store, all of this go a long way towards meeting our goal. In my next slide, I will talk about how each of these 6 dimensions have a varying impact on the 5 challenges that we have. One of the areas that, again, just as behavior, doesn't get spoken of very often is circularity. And circularity, as you see, has a big impact on 4 of the 5 dimensions that we spoke about. The real big emission areas can really be reduced significantly if we are able to bring circularity into our business. And hence, we strongly believe that the focus has to be on renew, reuse, and recycle. In my second last slide, on the next slide, let me share an excellent example of circularity and how the simplicity of a concept can inspire us to reimagine our own behavior and also the expectations from large enterprises and startups. I'm sure each of us has, during the pandemic especially, sat at home, ordered food. It's very convenient to do. However, there is a significant cost to it. In our experience, most of the food does get delivered in plastic containers. They use the not so very clean bikes to be delivered, etc. And this is a huge problem. One study in the United States said that the packaging containers alone contribute to 23% of materials reaching the landfills in US. And it has increased during the COVID times. And we can rest assured as to where this is coming from, right? Additionally, most of it ends up on beaches, on waterways, etc. All of this causing significant hazard to the aquatic life. One of the things that I want to quickly highlight here is a traditional way of delivering food that has always existed in India. It's called the Dabbawalas of Mumbai. Dabbawalas is loosely translated to as someone who's carrying the box. There are more than 5,000 Dabbawalas in Mumbai, and they make 200,000 odd deliveries every day. This system is unparalleled in its complexity, and it has an extremely low error rate, about 1 in 16 million. It has been the talk of multiple B school case studies, including the Harvard Business School. Multiple articles have been written about it in The Guardian, Forbes, etc. However, the carbon neutral aspect of their business has almost never been spoken about. The business operations have almost zero impact on the environment. Firstly, they take lunch boxes from home. Each of these lunch boxes have zero packaging material. They use metal tiffin boxes. Second, they use public transport and they use bicycles for transportation. So a huge business like this with almost a zero carbon footprint, which relies solely on the concept of circularity, I think should be a poster child and a big example for the businesses that we are trying to invest in and trying to create. On my closing slide, I want to just quickly highlight a few things. Firstly, yes, I think we've made a case that the task is daunting. However, let's just reflect on what we as a society have been able to achieve in just the last 1 century. We have had more peace than ever was in our entire history. We've not had a big war in the last 75 years. When it comes to healthcare, we have made significant progress. The life expectancy is much higher. In fact, we have been able to bring down infant mortality by 5 times in just the last 50 years. We don't need to go back very far. We've seen how the world has been able to combat the COVID pandemic and how almost vaccines have reached almost everyone. There are cures that are being spoken about. So yes, we firmly believe that if we come together, we can definitely build a sustainable future for ourselves and for those coming after us. So let's reboot and reimagine and work towards building this out. I'm sure there is a significantly interesting set of areas of discussion and keynotes to follow, which we just spoke about. Please stay tuned and we will talk about this topic a lot more as we move on. Thank you so much. Back to Natalia.
Thank you so much, Siddhant. That was very intriguing, especially that live energy prize pop quiz. Indeed, investing in the future means committing to the adoption of green energy resources. So like Siddhant said, stay tuned for our upcoming keynote talk and we'll be right back. And we're back. Talent is at the core of a company's success, and talent is all the more important in enabling a net zero future. How can companies realign their talent strategies with a climate change lens? To shed light on how organizations can relook at their talent strategies, I'd like to invite Vijay Swaminathan, CEO for Drop, for the next session.
Thank you, Natalia, for the kind introduction. I'm really excited to be here on this key topic. As many of you know that several large public companies are committing to net zero commitments. And this last 2 to 3 years, there have been several discussions about sustainability. And net zero pledges are not just pertaining to energy systems. We really have to rethink about our transportation systems. We really have to think about the workforce where they are working from in terms of the buildings. And we really need to think about the automation levels of each and every process so that we can decarbonize this world. And this is not going to be an easy journey. And that is why these companies are setting targets for 2050 and 2060 and so on. That means from a human resources standpoint, we almost have to begin the journey now in terms of what type of workforce do we need to achieve these goals, and also what type of workforce and reskilling we need to adapt right now to achieve these goals. In the beginning of last quarter, we conducted an interesting study. We reached out to about 50 global companies, definitely a small sample in the grand scheme of things. But we asked them a lot of questions around sustainability. And primarily, we were trying to inquire what are the primary enablers and the barriers for achieving sustainability goals that they have planned in the next 10 to 20 years. Almost across all regions, whether that is North America, EMEA, APAC, LATAM, the primary concern really came around reskilling the workforce and as well as hiring the right digital skills into the organization to achieve the goals of sustainability. And we further classified these concerns or the barriers into two categories. One is, how do I transport my existing industrial skills into the sustainable world of skills? And the other one is, how do I bring in more and more digital skills, more and more technology-related skills, so that new technologies can be put in place? Please keep in mind that the goals that we have to achieve with respect to decarbonization is not just using existing technology, but also we may have to build newer technologies, newer digital technologies. And when you view this through these two fronts, many companies have already started beginning, how do we better educate our industrial workforce? And there is a lot of AR, VR models that are being used, quite a bit of digital twin-like operations that are in place. For example, there is quite a bit of AR and VR-related activities, animated visualizations to install a wind turbine. These are components that will help fairly a newly skilled resource to install and maintain a wind power turbine, for example. So this is one sort of effort. And the other sort of effort that is required is the underlying technological talent or the digital talent that would require us to do automation, IoT, AI, ML, and multiple other areas. And we actually mapped about 500 MSAs across the globe to identify what are the top global hotspots that are emerging with respect to technology. Now, there exists a sizable supply-demand gap as it is, and new hotspots are emerging. Eastern Europe talent, technology talent is coming up, especially on the software side. Southeast Asia is emerging. New hotspots are coming up in India. And definitely post the pandemic, there are newer hotspots emerging, both in Canada and as well as in the United States. Latin America, countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico have done exceptional investment into education. While that is all great news, the overarching message is there is still a huge supply-demand gap. About 7 million people are the gap as it stands today. And it's going to increase quite a bit in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, what can organizations do with sustainability goals and other digital transformation goals? This gap is bound to exceed more and more. And we are in this presentation, we have examined a few things that organizations may consider doing. One of the important things that organizations can consider doing is, how do I bring in more early career talent into the mix and really make them career ready? And if you look at the globe, there are large hubs like China, India, and United States coming up in terms of how much STEM graduates they have and how much engineering graduates they have. China has about, on an annual basis, graduates about 1.4 million. India is about 1.2 million. The one challenge that many of these systems bring into the picture is the readiness. And many times companies are not creating enough early career talent jobs, or do not have the right infrastructure to really mentor and bring up to speed this early career talent. And also, very interestingly, we have trends like cross-border movement that is beginning to pick up post the pandemic. A lot of talent is migrating from Africa to France and UK, and actually Switzerland and Amsterdam is also gaining a lot of talent. And talent is moving from places like China and India in smaller numbers into USA and Canada, and that has been the trend for a while now. And this type of movement have to be understood well so that you can proactively create the right level of partnership. One interesting case study that comes to my mind is post-World War II, the United States created nursing schools in Philippines so that the people who want to come to the United States from Philippines would learn nursing and then come in, because the United States sensed a key shortage of nursing population in the 1960s and the 1970s. And this type of strategic move, companies would have to take leadership and understand. For example, our analysis show that about 30 to 35% of Europe's digital transformation talent would have to come from Africa. So what type of proactive hubs that we can establish, proactive partnerships that companies can establish? And largely, barring a few companies, few tech companies and a few forward-looking companies, we have not taken the full advantage of the African ecosystem. And this is another key strategy that companies should consider as part of the sustainable goals. Now, our analysis show that there is, across the African continent, tech and tech-related talent is about 1.5 million people. And it is not all talent is absolutely corporate ready, but this is the potential talent that companies can leverage over a period of time if we do all the right things. And there are many hotspots coming up, whether it is in Rwanda, for example, where there are quite a bit of AI startups coming up. Nigeria, tech ecosystem is getting stronger. Ghana is getting stronger. And Egypt is gaining momentum. All these ecosystems have to be understood well. And the early career talent and also the late career talent there from a digital transformation need to be understood and planned well within the talent strategy of companies. And one of the interesting things that I touched upon early on is around how do you create more and more early career roles, and how do we truly build the right internships and even pre-professional experience by working with local colleges, community colleges, not just large established universities, but how do we identify smaller colleges, smaller universities, and create the right level of internships. And we don't see this happening because in some cases, I was reviewing a job description where it said it's an entry-level job, but required 3 to 4 years of experience. And that's truly not an entry-level job. Now, we have to understand, for example, within software development, how do we create a lot more web development type of entry-level jobs or Java development type of entry-level jobs, and build the hierarchy towards a distributed computing model and get into the SDE stack and the senior software engineer stack. Similarly, if you look at the cloud stack, there is a lot of cloud support associate roles or junior cloud engineer roles that can be created. One of the important things that we have to consider in the current ecosystem is the availability of various certifications. A lot of the cloud roles can be effectively performed today through 3 to 4 month certifications. And there seems to be a disconnect with respect to that regard, especially when it comes to enterprises creating these roles. Not enough entry-level roles are being created. And similarly, there is opportunities in cloud security stack. There are opportunities in QA automation, manual testing, and so on. The opportunities are there. It just requires proper re-engineering and understanding of what are the right entry-level roles, and even before that, what are the right internships and the pre-professional experience levels that we can create within the ecosystem. And when you start working backward like that, what you are doing is you are creating enough set of pipeline for companies to look into various digital transformation initiatives. Now, today, you would need to do, in order for us to achieve the sustainable goals, we would need to do a lot of automation related work or IoT related work or embedded systems work. All this would require a sustainable set of funnel that we can build proactively. Now, opportunities like this can also lift people from the streets, people from poverty. And that to me is a true sustainable goal and a noble goal, because we need not rely on conventional degrees when it comes to many of the technology stacks that exist today. And we can actually partner with multiple certification institutes and then lift the society from the bottoms up to a new age, upper middle class type of an environment. So this is a great opportunity for companies with the net zero goals that are being laid out. At the same time, we would also have to keep in mind our existing workforce. And the late stage workforce or the Gen X workforce also need reskilling or retooling. Many companies have formed a lot of partnerships and they have implemented platforms, multiple learning platforms, but the adoption in our analysis show that the adoption of such reskilling initiative is around 17 to 18% in North America. And it's about 33 to 34%, the highest in Norway, when we looked at the courses completed through many of the online programs. And this type of adoption needs to go further higher and higher. And that is really the responsibility of the enterprises to create more and more opportunities. Now, how can we move database administrators into software stack? How can we move data analysts into data scientists? How can we move business analysts into layers like citizen developers, where they can build applications through modern stack? And this type of analysis and career pathing and developing these pathways and making it available to existing workforce should be a critical responsibility of companies today. And this is not an easy job, but the ecosystem is very ripe. Today, we have multiple course providers who are providing such targeted transitions. Now, it is a question of looking at what type of workforce do I currently have, what are the digital intentions or initiatives that I need to execute, including sustainability-related initiatives, and then mapping out where do we need to create capacity, where do we need to buffer up, and where do we need to create pipelines. And such transitions, once it is done, it also helps employers retain the employees, because you are sending a very important message that you deeply care about your employees and you are creating progressive paths so that you really mean that you deeply care for the employees and about their learning on an ongoing basis. And this, very few companies are attempting a systemic way in this, but we need to do a lot more in this regard. And we are quite excited about some of the reskilling propensity indices that we can create in such a scenario across various digital initiatives are drawn. Finally, in conclusion, we see that in order for companies to achieve net zero goals, we have to take a holistic talent strategy. A very successful talent strategy that needs to be built from today will help you achieve your net zero and sustainability goals. And we see this as, in summary, 4 important elements. We have to bridge the existing supply-demand gap, and that means we have to train the existing workforce in new age technologies through various reskilling paths, but also we have to find newly developing hotspots, including the new hotspots in places like Africa, India, newer developed hotspots in places like Latin America, United States, and Canada. So we have to take a holistic look at all the available talent. And one of the important things which is coming as post-pandemic is the ability to work in remote way and also ability to take advantage of the gig workforce. Now, one of the rapid accelerations of post-pandemic initiative, due to the rapid acceleration of cloud adoption, we can now be in the same agile circle, but live in any part of the world. And that gives you access to more and more talent, not just for technology talent, even for tapping rather a contact center type of workforce, or from a technology support type of workforce. And it gives you the ability to take advantage of being the footprint and also bringing in specialists for targeted workforce efforts, whether it is data science or developing specific AI ML models and multiple other initiatives. And we got to also, as I emphasized in the beginning, we got to have a very clear strategy on early career talent. And one of the important things that you could do is, in order to address the readiness of the early career talent, we could also implement university-like programs within the enterprise where they come in and they graduate through a 3-month program or a 6-month program and then join the business. And this strategy is being used by several companies successfully. And we see this as a very important element to win the net zero talent war. And finally, both the industrial workforce and also the corporate workforce that needs to be reskilled have to be evaluated thoroughly and needs to be brought into the newer stack, whether that is on the data stack, whether that is on the cybersecurity stack, whether that is on the software stack, and also the core engineering innovation stack that is required to enable sustainability. If we take our point of view is if we take a holistic strategy across all these 4 elements, companies can achieve their net zero goals, and we can move towards a very successful low carbon employment environment. Thank you for this opportunity and wish you all a great success in this conference.
Thank you so much, Vijay. That was not only insightful, but also very intriguing, and I'm sure our audience members have gained some very valuable insights. So before we hear from our next speaker, let's take a short break. We'll be right back. And we're back. Well, all over the world, people and organizations are readying themselves for the 5G revolution. Our next speaker will help us unlock 6G for a sustainable future. Please welcome Dr. Walker Ziegler, who leads Nokia's digital transformation initiatives aimed at exploring and leveraging innovations with customers and partners in the ecosystem for the 6G era. Dr. Ziegler, the virtual floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Natalia. So good morning, good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, this is about the future. It's about unleashing human potential. It's about the next generation of communications, 6G. And what I can tell you right up front, and this I think is very important and it's key, as we now have this unique opportunity to frame and define what 6G is. It all starts with the value we create, the value impact we strive to jointly create at Nokia, Nokia Bell Labs, and with the various partners in academia, in industry, and also with the operators, so as to define that future. And it all starts with aspects of sustainability, trustworthiness, and inclusion. And maybe that's different from previous Gs, and we'll come back to this as I will share with you a couple of thoughts as to what sustainability is about at Nokia and beyond, and in particular also why 6G is all about opportunity to make it happen. So with this, first of all, I have the pleasure to work with Nokia, the fun part of Nokia, Nokia Bell Labs. But one of the reasons why I do also enjoy working with Nokia tremendously is the fact that it's really about sustainability approach and the company purpose. So when you look at Nokia, the purpose of the company really is about creating technology that helps the world act together. And that's really the approach. It's at the heart of what we do, and it ties into areas of focus around climate. You've heard some aspects on why this is relevant at this time, and probably all aware, building on the earlier speakers. So climate, net zero, change and impact is needed. Culture and integrity are two other aspects. And what I can also tell you is that we at Nokia have, I think, what can be considered a foundation of good practice in a variety of dimensions. Some of these tie into environmental management and circularity. But then, of course, we are a leader in technology and architecture with 5G today, serving hundreds of customers in both communication service provider and enterprise space. So it's all about the portfolio of energy efficient technology that we offer. But then I think the impact we can make and we strive to make, and this is very important, goes beyond the technology per se. It includes aspects in a broader sense, being relevant in conjunction with sustainability topic, such as supplier, human labor rights, as well as health and safety aspects, labor practices, more broadly speaking, in our own operations, of course, and the way also we source. And last but not least, I think that's also a prominent topic, and we'll come back to it. Why? Because it's very important also as a research domain in technology sense for 6G data privacy and security trustworthiness. So in summary, no surprise, sustainability is a Nokia strategic priority. And having said this, we don't start at square zero. We have a very powerful starting point when it comes to 5G. But at the same time, let's be clear, the ambition really is to make this and to live this as an ambition, as an effort of continuous improvement, right? And so setting the stage in the upper part of the slide, some of the key messages as to how we go about this, and it really ties into our strategic objectives, making sure that environmental issues are part of the business processes. And then, of course, very importantly, we need to follow up on what we say. So it's all about metrics. It's about validating the improvements and making sure that also we create value out of the interactions with the stakeholders, the customers we serve, the companies we work with on the sourcing side. And that, by the way, in case you're still doubtful, you can also read up and check some of our data as part of Nokia People and Planet Report. So it is all about making sure that not only you define the right KPIs, key performance indicators, but you truly also measure and follow up. And of course, at the heart of our continuous improvement ambition really is products and solutions and the way we create these, especially also in a circular sense. Now, having said all this, it's a good idea probably to look at 5G. And as I said, 5G evolution is on. And by the way, just to make sure you're all aware, this is an ongoing journey, right? We have another 8 or 9 years to go with 5G and now leveraging cool innovation and research out of Bell Labs into product as 5G further evolves. But let's just briefly reflect on where we are with the impact as we've already made. So when it comes to the ambition to go zero emission products, I think it's great to see the impact we've done with more than 150 customers in terms of modernizing the base transceiver stations, so the radio stations, with on average 54% less energy. So that's considerable, and it's needed. And at the same time, when you listen to operators, like I think Telefonica went public with this, in a live network, 5G can be up to more than 90% more energy efficient. So this is very real, and it's a great starting point. At the same time, I guess automation and analytics, there's a solution suite from Nokia called AVA, Automation Virtualization Analytics for Energy Efficiency as a Service. So increasingly, we not only look at data, but we use techniques from machine learning, AI, to really reduce energy consumption, especially on the radio network side. And of course, there's all this beneficial impact for the various customers, the various sectors that our customers serve, and in some cases also Nokia serve direct. So all of this is very powerful, and it's a great starting point. Maybe the one item I would add to this is actually maybe the item of liquid cooling. There's another cool operator out of Finland that we serve by the name of Elisa, who have shown this in the live network first, like 30% of total carbon dioxide reduction thanks to liquid cooling of base stations. And by the way, why is there so much emphasis on base station? When you look at the network, that's where probably like half of the energy is being consumed. So it's a good idea to look at radio. The next big ticket items would be the cloud infrastructure. Increasingly, as we move towards the 6G era, things are being cloudified, and transport as well deserves attention. So with this, let's move to 6G and the 6G era communications for the 2030s. And again, it's a unique opportunity for us. It's a unique opportunity for us at Nokia, but also for the community worldwide. Why? The opportunity to really shape, define the next standard presents itself typically like once every 10 years. So we need to get this right. We need to start with the value ambitions first, and sustainability impact really, and the key value associated with sustainability need to come first. And all of this starts and ties into a powerful vision that we've had at Nokia and framed at Nokia a couple of years back, and it's still very relevant. It's about connecting the worlds, right? Connecting the physical, digital, and human biological world so as to unleash human potential, but very much tied into key value indicators associated broadly with the theme of sustainability. And when we say sustainability, by the way, there's aspects of economic sustainability, societal sustainability, as well as, of course, environmental sustainability. So connecting the worlds and all this, and this is where now Nokia Bell Labs and a technology leading company like Nokia come into the picture, is happening against a variety of transformational new technologies, such as ubiquitous compute, precision sensing and actuation. That actually goes to the heart of one of the dimensions that's really very powerful with 6G coming up, namely that we would co-design networks for both communications and sensing. Pretty cool idea. A lot of cool engineering research required to do that. Knowledge systems, how do we deal with data and really leverage these also in the interest of energy optimization. And then last but not least, also this broad topic of human-machine interface, the way we interact with each other, but also with the machines. And with this, let's have a quick look at use cases, going fast, but I think just to give you a flavor, we at Nokia clustered these broadly into 3 buckets: augmenting human intelligence, augmenting human experience, augmenting human control. And once you start giving these use cases a closer look, no surprise, many of these tie into powerful options to contribute to sustainability objectives and to make the planet more sustainable. Right? It starts with augmenting human experience. Now, of course, with Corona, we all wish that we could travel again and meet up face to face. And yet, the options that we today have in a session like this, and that in the 6G era we would have with fully immersive telepresence, holographic kind of telepresence, that will definitely help to reduce energy consumption and carbon dioxide footprint. Why? Because there will be less need to travel. So that's a good example. So you have good experience at the same time with beneficial impact. And when you look at digital assistance, it's another interesting area where I think we can definitely improve human intelligence while at the same time probably reducing the need for people to move around. But especially when you think of the elderly at the same time allowing them like to stay at home in their trusted environment for longer, and all of this empowered by networks that will provide performance attributes that go beyond what 5G can do. And there's, of course, a whole bucket that ties into the notion of human control, in many cases also optimizing energy consumption, such as cooperating robots. And when you look at some of the requirements associated, therefore, with 6G, some of these are pretty much extreme. And by the way, a word of caution, you will not get all of these at the same time, right? But coming back to the collaborating robots, that's probably where you would potentially need even sub-millisecond latency in some cases, extreme reliability, like 9 nines. And then there's this whole theme of trustworthiness, of course, associated especially also with industrial use cases. But when you look at the new requirement set and going around that kind of spider web, of course, the one dimension that gets a lot of attention is about throughput and capacity for the right reasons. But there is some very important attributes, performance indicators that tie big time into sustainability. And for instance, on the device side, the ambition to create zero energy devices on the scale, flexibility, and sustainability category side, indeed, it is about sustainability and indeed making sustainability objectives a design criterion and not an afterthought. I think that's part of it. And inclusion is another dimension you could highlight in this regard. So like, how do we connect the unconnected? So that's the ambition of global coverage. And of course, as you go around this, I guess the other item you would also mention is the adaptability response, which again helps you optimize process efficiency, but at the same time, typically also energy efficiency. So with this, let's have a very quick look at more the technology side, broadly clustered into domains, and how would these help us with energy efficiency and sustainability impact in the 30s. So zero energy devices I already mentioned, and tying into JCAS, another great acronym, Joint Communication and Sensing, very powerful. You use the same spectrum, so it's an element of sharing resource. It's a good way of being efficient. And at the same time, of course, connecting the billions of sensors for fused monitoring, such as for carbon dioxide emission. We've started that journey, by the way, with 5G. Good reference case would be Hamburg Harbor. But now, of course, as we move into the 30s, all of this will be a lot more powerful and consistent. Radio side, chipset miniaturization, even as we miniaturize more, energy consumption goes down. Advanced options of massive MIMO, so moving to phased array antennas with maybe even 1024 elements, and of course tying into new spectrum. That is, I think, also potentially helpful to increase level of performance, but at the same time trying to find ways that we would not increase overall energy consumption. So the energy efficiency gain will be significant, but we need to manage overall energy consumption. And that's also why we need to look at cloud capability, resource optimization across heterogeneous cloud networks and devices, as well as advanced means of orchestration. And this ties into the theme of automation, as well as, that's the upper right-hand box, items of distributed data and information, notion of federated learning, all with the objective to optimize energy consumption and sustainability objectives. So with this, before we wrap up, I think there's one more aspect to be mentioned, and it's very important. It's part of how we at Nokia go about things in early research. So it's about teaming up with others. It's about pre-competitive joint collaboration, joint research. I'm happy to share with you all that we at Nokia are engaged in leading the European Union 6G flagship project. It's called HexaX. And there, clearly, we have a unique opportunity to really jointly work together, including Nokia competitors, like a company from Sweden, and key operators, key partners from academia, small to medium enterprise. And in case you're not aware, the whole exercise is coming along very nicely. And when you look at our vision, the 6G vision as we have framed out of HexaX, I think it's very encouraging to see, and again, no surprise, that the topics of sustainability, trustworthiness, and inclusion are right at the heart of this. On the technology side, of course, it's about technology enablers in the areas of new radio access, connected intelligence, as well as architectural enablers of network disaggregation and dynamic dependability, but all serving the greater value and context of sustainability, trustworthiness, and inclusion. And with this, back over to you, Natalia, but let's have a quick final hint at related resources for those who wish to dive deeper and probe more. There's a number of good materials available on the web, and of course, I'd like to invite you all to check these out and maybe send your comments and feedback if you feel something is missing. So thank you very much, and back over to you, Natalia.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ziegler. We actually have 2 questions from the audience, so we want to get answers to. So mobile communication systems, as we know, have been the key drivers of digital innovations. And looking ahead to 2030 and beyond, 6G is under definition as the next generation mobile communication system. Now, what do you think could be some of the key technical challenges and research directions at the beginning of 6G definition towards the sustainable development of 6G itself, as well as its role serving as a tool to help improve the sustainable development of the whole society?
Well, the question is like I could repeat the entire talk, and let me exactly do
keep
this.
Keep it brief, right?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. So no, it's a great question. So first of all, it's opportunity. It's opportunity to really look at what are the relevant problems we try to solve, not just for the information communication industry, the communication context, but really for all the variety of sectors as we serve. It's happening now with 5G, and we'll see continued momentum with this as we move into the era of 6G. And maybe one of the aspects I did not explicitly mention, and that is very relevant, is the relevance of subnetworks. So specialized subnetworks, millions of them for various contexts of applicability, from farming to industry. And I think that holds a lot of promise. When you look at the enabling technologies, I think I hinted at the key ones in my speech, and I think the best way to summarize is indeed radio, connected intelligence, as well as architecture, as broad themes of research. And I guess some of the questions that we currently discuss are, they all start from a gap analysis. So if you go and check out some of the materials we also published as part of XX results, you can see and check out where we perceive the current gaps are, especially also in the dimension of energy consumption. So let me give you one example more on the radio access network side. It's about how can we optimize systems such that they consume zero energy and zero load. That's a key question. It's a question that's easily formulated, but the answer is not so trivial. And that's a broad area of research. Just to give you one example, as we have currently framed, and we are jointly looking, especially at Nokia Bell Labs, of course, looking for the right elements to answer these questions, but with a greater objective in mind.
All right, thank you so much, Volker. And the final question is, what do you think could be some of the potential new capabilities of 6G that could address the sustainable development agenda in the times to come?
Yeah, so it's all about making sure that we, first of all, get a joint and common understanding what are the value indicators we strive to live up to, right? And I guess energy consumption clearly is one. Carbon neutrality, just to be clear, is the obvious one. That I'm, by the way, very confident we can achieve. So then the next one is, even with carbon neutral energy, let's minimize the energy we consume, right? And at the same time get performance improvement as we need, like for the use cases. And that's really part of the answer to your question. For the use cases, for the transformation experience, as we strive to create for mankind, right? And so holographic telepresence would be an example. Trustworthy networks, digital twins is another good example. What would it take to really build digital twins of smart cities or of an industrial plant, so as to not only optimize like the overall process environment, and that could be like, how do I get from like downtown to the suburb, and 6G can definitely play a role there in terms of tying things together, broad bandwidth, low latency response, and building on connected intelligence in conjunction with architectural innovation and disaggregation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing these wonderful insights and for being with us today, Dr. Ziegler.
Thank you,
up next,
thank you all.
It's been an absolute pleasure. All right, folks, so up next we have a very exciting coffee chat, so do stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. If the conversation has to shift from building sustainable models with business in mind to building business models with sustainability at the core, we will be capable of tapping into new markets, innovation, creating employment, and shifting economic processes and policies. Our next session is on how can profit be made while serving the planet? How can existing businesses rethink their current models more mindfully? The coffee chat is between Melanie Chapman, who is the Global Workplace Partner and Environmental Management at AXA XL, Iona Botsatu, Head of CSR at Societe Generale Global Solutions Center in India and Romania, and Amit Kulkarni, Partner at Zinnov. So who will put forth solutions on profitability with regard to natural environments, carbon footprint, and ecologies? Let's find out from our experts. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Natalia. Hello, everyone. I'm Amit, partner at Zinnov. Hope all of you are keeping safe. Right? Some very pertinent points shared in the earlier keynote by Volker on how technology is being implemented to solve some of the sustainability challenges. What we would like to do in this session is to understand how enterprises are actually implementing some initiatives on the ground, which is why I have two very key stakeholders who are champions of driving sustainability initiatives at each of their organizations. I have with me Iona from Societe Generale and Melanie from AXA. They both have been instrumental in driving enterprise-wide initiatives and mandates on sustainability and have a very distinct vantage point on the topic of how enterprises can rethink their business models by looking at sustainability as a key outcome. Welcome, Iona and Melanie. Great to have you on this forum.
Hello.
Hello, Amit. Hello, Melanie.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
colleagues from previous panels and our audience.
Great. So before we start, may I request both of you to take a minute and just talk a bit about your current role for the audience?
Yeah,
Melanie,
so
please.
I'm a part of the global workplace team. So I'm based in operations, but I work extremely closely with the CSR team on building our strategy, on how we manage our portfolio and our digital footprint and all sorts of things like that. I've been doing the role for about 3 years now. Before that, I was working in workplace management moves and everything else. So quite a broad idea of how sustainability fits in with operations now.
Great.
Thank you. So my name is Ioana Botezatu. I'm a Romanian by birth, but I am also an international animal, let's say, because I lived in France for 10 years. I've studied in high school with different nationalities. I'm now working with many nationalities and very close to colleagues from India and colleagues from France. And I have been with Societe Generale since 1.5 years now, steering the strategy of corporate social responsibility alongside other colleagues from both India and Romania and colleagues in France. And prior to this, I worked for Interpol, International Criminal Police Organization in Lyon. Yes, we've created environmental security program at a time where police were not very much prioritizing this topic of environmental integrity and sustainability. So if we manage to bring it to their agenda, then we can do anything we want together. Let me put it like that. Because, you know, police is very much oriented on social pressures, on like murders or any other thing than the death of a rhinoceros or the trafficking in waste. But now more and more they start to look into this space. So this is about me in a nutshell. I have my coffee because this is a coffee chat thing. So
Great.
Thank you for that. And I turned off my lights, okay? And you still see me. I'm benefiting from other lights from the office.
Great, Joanna. I didn't know about the Interpol part, but yeah, I'll keep it. Keep my questions apart from that. But great. Let me get straight into the questions. Melanie, my first question to you. Let's start with you, right? What does sustainability mean, right, or imply to your organization? What is the mission, vision that AXA as a company has regarding this topic?
Okay, so we have a mission statement, which is our impact, our future. It's very much based in resilience, and we believe in making our clients and communities much more resilient so they can face global challenges that we're all facing currently. And we've aligned that strategy with some key issues that are pertinent to our business, but we also feel to the global picture, and that's climate, water, and financial resilience. And that's what we work around.
Great. So how does it roll up at the overall company level, and how is it disseminated at individual geographies? Is there a pattern, or is it consistent across every location?
So myself and CSR work really closely with our different regions. It's more of a regional based how we do it, but it's definitely we're very lucky. We have really good leadership support with this. So they're definitely our champions, which is great for us. They lead by example as well, I would say, which is brilliant. So we work very closely with the leadership in the different countries because it's unique region to region on how they tackle their sustainability, the different challenges they face in sustainability. So it's very much, we have a broad set of targets and things that we work towards, but it's definitely tailored to regions and what their challenges are.
Got it. Yeah, now coming to you, I would want to pose the same question, right? You're representing Society Generale. How is it at your view, because you run both the Romania as well as the India centers, in terms of you're deeply closely associated with both of these? How is the overall mandate, and how does it roll up at the individual geographies?
So you talk about the sustainability mandate we have in
Correct.
Société Générale. So look, for us, sustainability means business, and we are preparing to have it as a mainstream business. Because can you imagine in a couple of years from now, if we do not have if all our businesses in this world are not sustainable, then we are going to have some issues with our planet, with our climate. Now, but let me tell you what Société Générale means, because maybe not all our audience know what we do exactly. We represent one of Europe's leading financial service groups and an important player in the economy. Because if you think about it, financial services are the nervous system of any economy. It's an indicator. If something goes wrong, immediately we sense it. We know, we have this visibility and coverage. Société Générale has been established 150 years ago, even before United Nations organization was established. So you see the role of banks in the world, what this actually means. We are mature in the sense of sustainability, and we have been growing our mindset in this area, really, because just in 2020, our corporate purpose has evolved. We are now building together with our clients a better and sustainable future through responsible and innovative financial solutions. To give you some numbers, really, in 2020, the group had 1.4 billion euros net income. Sure, out of this amount, and due to this pandemic, 28 million was given to fight the COVID pandemic and to grassroots level, like health staff and healthcare workers, and we've partnered with charities, we supported vulnerable communities. So, and generally, large companies do have this kind of strategy to give a little bit of their money to support specific crises we go through. But the issue is that the climate change, global warming, that's the crisis we live since several years. It's not just the pandemic now. We actually have to consider our goal to achieve sustainability as an immediate critical objective. So, but okay, so what is Société Générale? We are a French retail banking. We are an international retail banking, insurance, financial services to corporate, even, for example, in mobility services. We have these ALD companies in the world that power companies' mobility, and it's becoming greener and greener, leasing vehicles. We have global banking and investor solution as well. So like all these integrated banking services that a business model that can accelerate our economy's transition to circular, sustainable economies. We just have to want to do that.
Got it. Got it. I think those are very important points which you made, especially on banking and mobility. And I'll just, probably picking up from that, move to Melanie. Melanie, we also spoke about the kind of investments that enterprises make, right, in terms of ensuring that they are sustainable or they are achieving certain objectives of being sustainable, right? You mentioned water, energy being a critical aspect. You're looking at that very closely at AXA. Right? What are the kind of investments or initiatives that have been taking place in AXA over the last 2 to 3 years, especially around, is there a focus on reducing the overall data center spend? How are you looking at each of these things?
Yeah, so data centers are an interesting one for us, and we're slowly moving towards cloud transformation. And I've actually this week been talking to our digital team quite closely and our AXA group team on how we really we go further than that, and we start to really look at how things like your email inbox, and I think you said something really interesting the other day. If you looked at the internet, it would be like a fourth region in its impact, and I think that's something as a company we're really beginning to look at and take seriously. So I think that's something we're developing to actually put that into our footprint and measure it and then make changes from that. But a good thing for us is our travel is probably one of the largest parts of our footprint. We're an international company. Client face-to-face meetings are extremely important to us, but we do need to balance that with our carbon footprint. So in 2020, in January, we introduced a carbon contribution. And it was quite bold. It was $100 per 100 tons of carbon per flight. And that came directly from the traveller's travel budget. And then we used that to fund internal projects that directly reduce our footprint. And that could be anything from LED lighting. We use it to do carbon offsetting, which is a great project in Belize. So that was key for us as part of our travel budget, and it is designed to make people really think about that travel that they're taking, so that travel is efficient. It's business based, so that's why we've done that.
Yeah, maybe you'll have to relook at the travel part, especially in the last 18 months. I think there should be a different parameter now.
Unfortunately, we launched it and we were ready to launch right at the beginning of COVID closing down, and we decided to go for it anyway, and we did backdate some of the charges into 2019. It was, but people are very supportive of it. Actually, they're really supportive of it. So yeah.
No, I think the data center part is really critical, and that makes a lot of sense. And just holding on to that thought, Iona, you've been closely associated with the shared services part as well, right? And a critical aspect of it is also what goes into running a shared services part, and also the kind of investments that you make overall at an infrastructure level. How are you thinking of the key investments, not only at the shared services level, but at the overall company level, in terms of what investments and what initiatives have been taken, especially around driving some of the sustainable initiatives?
So yeah, you're right to make this separation. So the Société Générale Group and its business is very financial oriented, whereas our shared service centers, which is one entity, we consider ourselves as one entity with 2 country locations, we are powering services for the group. So we have different levers to achieve sustainability and to contribute to the group's CSR and sustainability agenda and all that. So from a group perspective, our most visible commitment is to align portfolios with the aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 through what we call Net Zero Banking Alliance. Don't know if you heard about it, NZBA. It's actually covering 40% of global banking assets. It's a big commitment, something that Société Générale is very proud of. But we have other commitments as well, and we have started to implement this since a couple of years already. We have committed to get out of coal by 2030 in OECD countries, and by 2040, the world, and think of Russia as well. We have committed to reduce our exposure to fossil fuels by 10% with the stock take in 2025. And I can give you some further example on how we do that. But particularly, okay, so like, I'll give you just an example, and it's linked to AXA as well. Société Générale, through positive impact finance, it had a recent deal, and it was the sole financial advisor in the creation and structuration of Hy24, so Hydrogen 24, which is the largest global fund exclusively dedicated to clean hydrogen infrastructure solutions. And AXA, so my colleague Melanie here, is also a stakeholder in this deal. Another example, a Spanish renewable energy operator successfully launched its first senior unsecured green bond of 500 million euro, and also it was powered by Société Générale. So, but from Côte d'Ivoire to China, Société Générale does facilitate investment in a lot of wind farm projects, rooftop projects, so a lot of energy transition focus for our business colleagues. Now, from a shared service center perspective, we have the means that my colleague Melanie would also identify, and she also has. We can experiment with the data center, with temperatures, reducing the pressure on our energy systems. For example, having our office furbished from recycled desks, having introducing intelligent lighting system and AVAC systems as well, ensuring that we have a no single-use no single-use plastic policy on the premises, as well as to empower our colleagues to during this hybrid work or work from home, to absorb the same type of practices at home, because we have to get rid of these plastic bags. We are just polluting everywhere. So let's stop this. We have alternative means for that.
Right.
So
right.
I can go on and on about it, but I let you answer. Okay.
No, definitely. So, but one thing which you importantly mentioned is, on the green loans, right? And those are very important in terms of green bond loans, right? That is how you are even incentivizing the overall ecosystem to somewhat adopt or move towards sustainability, right? So, Melanie, in terms of your view, is there something that AXA is doing differently, or you see, at an enterprise level being adopted differently to ensure that the overall ecosystem comes in place?
Yeah, so I think in terms of our products that we offer from insurance, we like to kind of work towards sustainable initiatives and then align it with ours. So a good example of this is our AXA XL France team are working with Marsh to assess and mitigate biodiversity risks. Clients are invited to incorporate environmental risk prevention audits and measurable criteria, and those industrial sites are encouraged to carry out initial biodiversity diagnosis and integrate the results into their risk management plans. And then in terms of that, we offer clients reductions on their deductibles, which encourages them to be responsible in what they're doing. And Iona mentioned circular economy there. We're working on a product which assesses opportunities for us to reduce waste in the event of client loss, encouraging clients to follow sustainable practices and enable the circular economy and avoid materials re-entering the supply chain and otherwise reusing and recycling. So that's what we're doing kind of on the business side. We're also exiting coal by 2030. We've made that commitment. So there's lots of things that we're doing, and I think we've also had a new sustainability team created this year with a new head, Andrew McFarlane. So I think they're going to make great strides for us as well in developing our products.
Excellent. Iona, just to build on your point on green bond loans, right? Is there anything else that you're trying out, or Société Générale at an overall business level is trying out to push a lot more sustainability specific mandates out in the market?
Yes, so look, our business teams in our business companies. So our shared service center is not a business company per se. We are a business partner to our business entities of the group. So, but we have super creative. No, so just to put things into perspective, but we have like really creative colleagues who are always on the lookout of what they can do, how they can structure products in such a way that have a tangible benefit to sustainable development. So to clarify, just to give a quick definition of what green loan is. What is the green loan in the end? No? So it really facilitates environmentally sustainable economic activity, looking at how nature works, at how ecosystems function. We also have sustainability-linked loans, where the borrower, so if I take money, I'm the borrower, I need to achieve a predetermined sustainability performance objective. If I don't achieve it, then I will be penalized. There is another type of financial instruments, such as like the social impact bonds, with proceeds oriented towards projects that lead to positive social outcomes, you know, targeting the social impact and not the financial return. Because way too often in our current economies, we have always looked at financial economic return, ignoring all the environmental and social externalities, which is not an option anymore, not a choice anymore. We don't have the luxury to think so narrowly. So the company, like the Société Générale, has committed to allocate 120 billion euros to support the energy transition between 2019 2023, and this target was achieved in like 70% by the end of 2020. You know, so we accelerate. There is an amazing appetite for clients, for investors, for businesses, for the entire international community to focus on this trend in this area, and for the governments, the authorities, to ensure that we are properly doing this transition, because, you know, and any new trend may have some vulnerabilities, and naturally some people have a tendency to exploit those vulnerabilities. Now, okay, I cut here just to mention that through the services that we power to the group, which are, I mean, our shared service centers, for example, the IT specialists work with virtually all IT teams of Société Générale Group in the world. So you see the power we have as shared service centers. So it's important to bring those best practices also in coding, green coding, as something as not as simple as that, because it's not simple to do coding. It's super difficult. But we have rules that we can follow in such a way that we reduce pressure on the energy grid around the world. So anything that we can do, any step that we can take to reduce our ecological footprint is worthwhile taken to be taken.
Very interesting, very interesting. Now, since both of you have been associated and integral to the CSR activities, and, you know, part of running the CSR mandates at each of your companies as well, right? Melanie, how is it closely aligned to what you're trying to achieve on the sustainability side, or rather, how CSR at your company and sustainability initiatives at your company are decoupling or are integrating?
So I think there's a couple of examples that I have. We have a really great volunteering community across all of AXA XL. It's a really diverse group. I think it's Hearts in Action. And over the past few years, they've had some sustainability-based initiatives that they've done. And a really great one is in India, in New Delhi. They've planted, they've worked with Give Me Trees Trust. And they are doing a 3-year project to plant 30,000 trees. So I think they planted over 6,000 last year, socially distanced, I'm told. And that will become self-sufficient within 2 years. And the team there really took that to heart, and they really pushed that. we also work around, and this is one of the pillars that we have around water. So we work closely on water scarcity and quality, and we work with WaterAid. And there we've been working in, I think it's in northern India, to get clean, good quality water to over 10,000 people. But it's also working with the community so they can do testing. They're trained in water testing and conservation, working with volunteers so that they can restore and clean up their water supply. So it's, yeah, and water harvesting. So I think they tie in a lot of our volunteering with our sustainability aims. Yeah.
Great. So I think we are right on top of there, but I'll ask a couple of questions. I've seen similar kind of questions coming in from the audience as well. As to, if I were to, ask you what would be your top recommendations on how enterprises should be looking at sustainability, right? What would be those top 2 or 3 ideas that you would talk about in terms of them looking at newer business models but also keeping sustainability at its core? Any suggestions, any thoughts that come to your mind?
Absolutely. Just to rebound on what Melanie was saying about sustainability and CSR. Look, sustainability is inherent to CSR and to any responsible strategy of the company, but it has 2 non-negotiable aspects. Do no harm to other people through discrimination. So do no harm. Do no harm to the environment. So mindful of the negative externalities that our businesses could have. And the elevated CSR dimension is to do good, to have a positive outcome to other people, to contribute to other people's lives and to the environment. So for sustainability, and Melanie mentioned about plantation, yes, we've done plantation to individual plantation because we cannot come together and plant together because of COVID, but we have received the saplings at home and we've planted on our own. But it's important to know that large planting campaigns sometimes had some problems because they were doing either monoplantation, so they have to do it with the experts to ensure that the good we do is good and not crazy. Okay, in terms of what I can suggest for as ideas for new business models, first and foremost, well, I think it's absolutely compulsory to start today. Key decision makers in the world, in big companies, in state-owned companies, in government, high-profile government officials, they have to have compulsory sustainability training, compulsory environmental protection training, because it seems that key people in our society seem to be oblivious to what the stakes are, and the stakes are existential. It's really, we cannot continue without interiorizing the fact that it is our job to ensure sustainability today, not tomorrow, not to leave it for 20, 50, 20, 100 years from now. It's what I can do today in the position of power that I am today. And I have to see that these decision makers go through mandatory training for sustainable development. Otherwise, they will make the wrong decisions.
Got it. Great. Melanie, your final comments on what do you think, any specific ideas or recommendations that come to your mind?
Yeah, I agree with Iona, and I think for AccessXL, it's really about research and innovation and working with communities and academia and other people within our industry on how we can innovate new solutions so that we can understand all those complex problems, because it is a complex problem, and how we can innovate both within our business and communities to help them tackle those problems, help them understand and tackle the problem.
Excellent. I think this was indeed a very thought-provoking conversation. Thank you once again, Iona and Melanie, for your views and your deep insights. It was great again, understanding a bit on the practitioners' aspects of how things actually work on the ground. So that's what I had, and I think the audience really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. Over to you, Natalia.
Thank you.
so much, Iona, Melanie, and Amit for those very interesting perspectives. Next up, we have a very power-packed panel discussion, so don't go anywhere because we'll be right back. And welcome back. Now we have a prestigious panel of industry leaders discussing how to accelerate sustainability through digital technologies. As digitalization is one of the key elements shaping our world, we will delve into its good and bad while achieving climate targets. So first up, we have Frédéric Mouret, the Industrial Director at Faurecia Zero Emission, Patrick Blankers, Head of Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility in Europe at Ericsson, Jeremy Gibbons, Senior Enterprise Architect at Air Liquide, and Vimal Menon, Partner at Zinnov, who will be the session moderator. Over to you, Vimal.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for chiming us in, and thank you everyone who's logged in for the sessions for almost a day. I think we've got 2 more sessions to go. We've had a pretty great day listening to topics of sustainability. And to be fair, I learned a lot in these sessions that have gone so far. The other angle, so in the morning, we've been looking at topics such as the talent for addressing sustainability, the networks that will define sustainability for tomorrow, and topics such as these, right? So now we move on to the other portion of the things. We move on to digitization for especially on sustainability, and we have a panel here who come from diverse industries, right? We have representatives from the automotive sector. We have representatives from the chemical sector, if I were to call it, and then of course on the connectivity side as well, right? So I'll probably start off with Frederick at some questions. When I was looking at, for example, at Faurecia, I understand that you have been working at a lot of low emission technologies, hydrogen being one of them, right? So how do you go about selecting hydrogen? Because hey, there's this whole bunch of electrification that is going on over the last year. You look at France, sold about 10 or 11% of the cars last year were electric in nature. So what's the kind of scalability of hydrogen as a solution when you look at it in the future, and how do you go about selecting it? So so it kind of stands out with what the other players are telling in the market. So what if you can share some quips on that?
Sure. So I think this is an excellent question because this will enable the people, the participants, to understand all the scopes of electrification. So electrification, this is one of the major trends. This is the major trend of the automotive. So as you said, it is going extremely fast, even much faster than people were thinking about several years ago, with 11% of BEV share already, and which will go quickly up to 30-40%. And this is putting all the industry, all the value chain under a very strong stress to follow up this trend. So Faurecia engage strongly in this market, and Faurecia selected options which include not only hydrogen, so this includes as well battery packs, in order to propose solutions matching use cases, because the key word, this is use cases. So you have use cases which are well fitting with the battery packs, with the battery, so the BEV, and Faurecia is proposing a solution for that. And you have other use cases which are more relevant for hydrogen. So typically, the mobility for trucks, small trucks, bigger trucks, long hauls, hybrid mobility, as you see coming to the market very fast, solutions with both batteries and hydrogen. We see really, and each day is confirmed a big market on hydrogen in as a standalone solution or as an hybrid solution. We are working on that on the different hydrogen technologies, including with Air Liquide, because there has been a partnership signed recently with Air Liquide for the use cases requiring liquid hydrogen storage solutions. So we are already producing hydrogen systems, gas storage systems, for different cases in Europe, in Korea, in China, soon in North America. We are exploring the different segments of this new market. So this is a market which is growing, which is coming, simply because batteries cannot answer to all the segments, all the use cases. There will be a given number of percents of the market which will go to hydrogen, and it will be a high added value segment. And so we are prepared for that and expect a very strong growth of this activity. So we expect to reach between 3 and 4 billion euro sales on this segment by 2030, including the activities we have for the production of fuel cells in a JV with Michelin, Symbio, which is named Symbio. So including these fuel cells and the gas storage systems globally.
And Jeremy, so what Frederick mentioned about, of course, he did mention that Air Liquide is also working on this, and being one of the largest producers of hydrogen in the world. So how do you look at it? The angle that I was viewing it is, how do you look at the whole supply chain portion of that, right? Because moving that quantity of hydrogen to the various industries that would need it, right? Automotive is just one use case for you. There could be FMCG, there could be oil and gas, there could be in the downstream, there'll be several industries like that. So how do you kind of view supply chain, and especially digitization in this trend, about your digital transformation initiatives for kind of creating a more sustainable supply chain? So how do you view that particular angle?
Thank you. Well, digital is, of course, an opportunity for optimizing our supply chain, or rather, maybe it's the other way around, the way that we contribute to other people's supply chain. And our applications of digital to sustainability are actually a natural extension to what we've been doing for several years now across the board at Air Liquide. So back in March, we announced substantial new commitments to sustainability with the goal of reducing our CO2 emissions by 1/3 by 2035 and eventually reaching carbon neutrality in 2050. And that's a very ambitious goal, given that gas production has a fairly high baseline. And that'll then, of course, contribute to the scopes of our customers, of course. Much of the improvement that we're targeting is going to come from innovative technologies in our industrial know-how, things like carbon capture or green hydrogen production. And at every step along the way, we're going to be using digital technologies to support that transformation. So we've been systematically connecting our different industrial assets so that we can pull operational data from them, and we can optimize their use. And this now covers everything from production plants to individual gas cylinders, trucks, trailers, customer relations, what have you. If we look at a couple examples, Air Liquide has been connecting its big gas production assets for 25 years now, well before it was ever called IoT. and collecting all kinds of data about them, something like 1 billion data points per day across those 300 or 400 plants. We've modernized that approach as part of a program called SIO, for Smart and Innovative Operations, and we've been working to leverage that vast treasure trove of operational data by combining that with new machine learning and optimization algorithms. The objective is to ensure that we can define operating parameters that are optimal according to whatever variables we choose, including energy consumption and emissions. For those assets, digital's contribution is not about directly reducing the CO2 emissions. It's really about giving us the monitoring and the control that will allow those transformations to be measured. And the real abatement will come from carbon capture and converting to renewable power. Another recent example, though, is a program we call Integrated Bulk Operations, or IBO. So our bulk business is where we supply gas in liquid form to customers like factories or hospitals in big tanker trucks. And every year, our bulk tankers drive the equivalent of a round trip from the Earth to Mars. So obviously, if you can optimize that a little bit, there's some sustainability gains there for the supply chain. And our IBO program is leveraging all kinds of artificial intelligence and optimization techniques to better forecast demand and avoid that way unnecessary deliveries, and then optimizing truck routing for the deliveries that we do make. And obviously, if you optimize the mileage, you have a direct impact on CO2 emissions. So overall, we're really working across the board on all aspects of the way we produce and then supply the gas to our customers. And digital is definitely a big part.
Got it. So Patrick, whatever Jeremy mentioned there, the one underlying element would be connectivity, because be it sensors or be it any of the networks that he has to create for delivering that relies on the networks that somebody like Ericsson creates, right? I mean, for example, even the 5G network that probably I'm using on my phone, it has been enabled by your organization, for all you know, right? So, but one thing which we seldom discuss is about the energy efficiency of technology such as 5G. So, in your viewpoint, what is the future for these energy efficient networking technologies, or even the ICT landscape in itself, right? What is your view on that particular element?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I should first start to explain 5G. Can you hear me? Yeah. Because maybe people have an incomplete picture of it. 5G has three important characteristics. First of all, it supports higher data rates, so faster communication. But also it has a low latency, which makes it interesting technology for industries. For example, remote control of vehicles, remote control of robots. And also it supports massive IoT. And in the standardization of 5G, energy efficiency has always been a very important requirement. First of all, the 5G radio technology is very spectrum efficient. So if you compare 5G with technologies like 3G and 2G, we can accommodate much more bits in a certain amount of spectrum. And because 5G should also support IoT, Internet of Things, it is also very important that wireless sensors, they use the energy very efficiently, because remote sensors, they often work on batteries, and within the standardization of 5G, the target was that battery lives should be in the order of magnitude of 10 years.
Okay.
So now let's look at the Ericsson portfolio, mobile network equipment. Ericsson has been performing life cycle assessments for many years in order to analyze our environmental footprint, our own environmental footprint, but also across the whole life cycle, all the way from cradle to grave, from raw materials until the end of life treatment of our equipment. And it appears that from a life cycle perspective, the main portion of the carbon footprint is caused by the energy use of the products in the field. And that is why we have a high focus on network energy efficiency, so increasing the energy efficiency of our products. There are concerns that 5G will dramatically increase the total mobile network use, energy use. And I must admit that if 5G is deployed in addition to existing installed base, then yeah, that would be the case. But that method is not sustainable. So therefore, Ericsson released its report called Breaking the Energy Curve, and that presents an innovative approach to addressing the increasing energy consumption in mobile networks. So I will mention a few examples of what operators can do in order to avoid increasing energy usage. First of all, we support something which is called Ericsson spectrum sharing. That allows to use 4G and 5G in the same spectrum band dynamically. And that is also supporting energy efficiency. Also, we advise operators to move to the latest generation of hardware because the new generation of hardware is much more energy efficient than previous generations. In one box, you can support 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. And in one box, you can also support multiple spectrum bands. Furthermore, it's also recommended that operators move the 2G and 3G traffic to the lower spectrum bands because then you need less towers for full coverage. Mm-hmm. And also, it would be better if they switch off 2G and 3G in the longer term. And then we also support software features. So to put hardware in sleep mode when the traffic is lower. So the sleep mode can be for milliseconds or seconds or even hours. For example, during the night, you can switch off part of the hardware without any impact on the customer's KPIs. And there are many features to support sleep modes. So we apply artificial intelligence also to predict the timing of the sleep mode and to optimize the network. And furthermore, it's also recommended that operators, they use remote site management. We also support such solutions that operators have a real-time view on the energy consumption of all the equipment on the site and that they can control it remotely. So we have a different number of sustainability targets for our company. One of them is that by 2022, 5G will be 10 times more energy efficient than 4G. For the same amount of transferred data. And the current results show that we are on track. So summarizing my answer, we have a high focus on increasing energy efficiency for network products, and 5G is a very energy efficient technology.
Got it. So Jeremy, taking from Patrick's view was more from a global network standpoint, right? But as somebody who's kind of designing, as an enterprise architect who's kind of designing the IT systems for a large enterprise, how big is the sustainable IT? Because that's been a buzzword that has been flying around for quite a while now. But how much of a charter is sustainable IT for you when you're designing such systems, right? And how does one even think about designing something like that? Because there are the various elements. So when you actually look at a 30,000 feet level, how do you go about designing such a sustainable IT system?
So, well, for an industrial company like Air Liquide, the foremost concern, and makes sense, is the impact of our industrial operations because they outweigh the footprint of our digital platforms significantly. One is measured in millions of tons, and the other one is in thousands of tons. So, the day digital contribution to our CO2 footprint is really not even a rounding error at the end of the day. But we are, of course, conscious that digital solutions overall, in infrastructure or applications or what have you, they all have an environmental footprint and they consume energy, sometimes substantial amounts of energy, and there's emissions and there's various other environmental impacts. So over the last 10 years, Air Liquide has made the public cloud a cornerstone of our digital strategy. And we believe we've made very significant progress in greening, if I can put it that way, our IT infrastructure by relying on suppliers who have themselves transformed their operations and committed to carbon neutral solutions and renewable power sources, including hydrogen. And we've also tremendously, they have tremendously improved the efficiency of their infrastructure, and they're giving us the levers that we can use to really correlate the actions that we take in our designs with the evolution of our digital carbon footprint. And that happens through tools like Microsoft has a sustainability calculator, and Amazon just announced a customer carbon footprint tool. And those are really helpful to establish that correlation. And so we're working to optimize that digital and IT footprint where possible, and also to find meaningful actions that will engage employees in the overall topic. Because at the end of the day, a digital footprint, even if it's not very, very big in the grand scheme of things, is more tangible to the end users than, say, the footprint of a hydrogen plant or something like that. So in this space, what we try to do is to avoid the typically misleading numbers around how much carbon this or that individual action consumes, things like that. Please go and delete all your old emails or something like that, and rather give our users a frugal mindset. Amazon CTO called it, "Don't forget to turn off the lights." And I think that's exactly the idea we want to give both our users and our IT teams that design new solutions. You have the means to choose to consume or not consume power and energy and generate carbon emissions. So use that power and do the right thing. Just don't necessarily go around bragging about how much CO2 you've saved that way. And overall, these are things that actually digital and IT has been working on for years anyway, because even if you don't put on the green lens, at the end of the day, a lot of these actions just make good economic sense. So I think that's really how we're going about it for now. We're focusing on mostly on how digital can enable the sustainability transformation of our industrial business, and then doing kind of across the board small influence actions to continue to improve a digital and IT carbon footprint that actually has improved quite a bit over the last 10 years.
Got it. And Frederick, I think moving on to the other side, wherein when you're looking at automotive, and the environment currently is highly regulated, right, across countries. So how much of your technologies that you choose to work with, etc., is kind of influenced by the government, right? For example, if you are picking up some initiative here in France, is it that, hey, is it because the French government is kind of pushing you towards one direction that you're going into hydrogen, for example? Because I remember we worked with Airbus long ago, about 5 years ago, when they wanted to look at, hey, what are kind of hydrogen's use cases? But this was Airbus, and this was 5 years ago. We see you taking a direction as well, moving in the direction as well. Has it got something to do with the French government that you're looking at hydrogen as an area as compared to some of the other countries which are pushing towards some other direction?
So Faurecia is a global company, and so Faurecia is supporting global markets. So this is really not at all a specific topic of a French market. Today, we see the push for hydrogen in all the parts of the world. So in Europe, in Asia, in America, even in North America, where it was not so obvious. Now we see a very strong push for hydrogen. So for sure, Faurecia is supplying markets. And as you said, markets are strongly determined by regulations. And regulation today are pushing a lot to electrification, and hydrogen is a part of the solution. Basically, we see the global trend, and we answer to the global trend. And the solutions are global. So to give you a case, so today we are supplying in Korea, customer with tanks which are made in France, so this is there is quite a good alignment between the different standards globally, and so it's absolutely possible to organize global markets regarding this technology. After the push for hydrogen, this is the push coming from the energy mix, which are determined by the different governments. the plans over the next dozens of years. So hydrogen will be a strong part of this energy mix on one side, and on the other side, hydrogen has excellent, very good use cases in mobility, but not only for mobility. You have as well many applications of hydrogen for example, to replace the diesel generators for the computer centers, typically. So you have many other cases than automotive for the use of hydrogen, and Faurecia is on these different cases. We are taking the technologies, we are selecting the technologies, the best technologies to answer to these needs, depending on their variability. So you have needs for small systems, typically for cars, which have to be very light and effective. You have needs for much bigger systems like containers, to have virtual pipelines of hydrogen on trucks. You have needs for stationary applications, and so we answer to all these needs because basically they use the same technologies. They can use the same technologies, and developing those technologies to store, to manage, to generate electricity from hydrogen. This is very similar for stationary and mobile applications. And Faurecia is on all these segments of the hydrogen market, and sees really great opportunities in all these segments, and that all around the world.
Got it. Makes sense. And Patrick, I think where Frederick did mention was about the whole governmental charters of the sustainable development goals that the governments come up with. We had a recent summit in Scotland where countries came up with targets as 2060 and 70. How efficient it is, or it's too little, too late, only time would tell us. But as organizations, how do you go about defining sustainable development goals, right? Would you have piecemeal ones, say, I'll have something for the next 2 years, I'll have something for the next 5 years? And would it differ country by country? How do you kind of view about it? Do you see something specific for France, for example? How do you go about defining that lyrics?
Well, sustainability is embedded in the Ericsson strategy and our vision and purpose. Our board is involved in defining the sustainability goals. And sustainability, of course, is a very broad area. So therefore, we have distinguished 3 different focus areas. The first one is responsible business. This covers, for example, business ethics and human rights, health and safety. And we have defined several goals in that area. The second one is digital inclusion, where we define goals for connectivity and our positive impact on society. And some goals, they are more related on risk mitigation, and other goals are, let's say, more focused on the positive impact. And the third area, which is, of course, also the main theme of this webinar, is environmental sustainability. And as I already mentioned, we use this life cycle assessment approach so that we have a pretty good view on, from cradle to grave, how is our environmental footprint across the whole supply chain, across the whole value chain. And this gives us a pretty good insight in the carbon footprint in all the various stages of the life cycle. So that helps us to determine where the focus is needed. So we have defined environmental goals for ourselves, for our own carbon emission. For example, Ericsson strives to be carbon neutral in our own activities by 2030. But also we have environmental goals for our supply chain and for the production operation. And we are also working on circular economy, defining goals to increase recycling and reducing, for example, single-use plastics. And you ask also about the influence of regulation. That definitely plays a role here. On the one hand, Ericsson tries to be ahead of the regulations. We try to be proactive. So, for example, we have been publishing about our carbon footprint already 25 years ago, before it was even required by regulation. But on the other hand, we also see governments moving forward very rapidly with ambitious goals, especially in the EU. And this also puts new requirements on us as a company. And then you also asked about France specifically. Well, in France, also all these three focus areas are relevant: responsible business, environmental sustainability, digital inclusion. But let me give one example of a recent success story. A 5G project with ArcelorMittal together with Orange that was announced last week. So together with Orange and ArcelorMittal, we will develop 5G use cases for the steel industry and test them. So think about, for example, automated guided vehicles and remote maintenance of the industry. And that will also lead to better energy efficiency and better safety for workers. France is a key market for Ericsson, and we will, of course, continue to develop sustainability-related initiatives, especially together with our customers.
Correct. Thank you, Patrick. So I think in the interest of time, we're kind of running out of time as well, which was allocated to us. Although I'll have more questions, but this was great. Thank you for enlightening me and whosoever did log in as well. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Frederick. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeremy, as well. So Natalia, over to you, please. It's yours.
Thank you so much for that fascinating discussion on decarbonization. This helped us understand that using big data for improving the life cycles of products and electricity grids is just one of the few ways to accelerate efforts towards net zero. The most pressing issue at hand is to shift the perspective towards digitalization and how it can help in working towards decarbonization rather than becoming a threat. We're almost at the end of the conference, folks, but don't go anywhere because we have saved the best for last. So stay tuned. And we're back. Our last session for today is with a very unique individual. She is a climate and social justice activist and a youth advocate in the climate space. She has worked alongside the world's leading authorities on sustainability and within the ever-growing network of young people, educators, businesses, and policymakers working to create a better world. Please welcome Phoebe Hansen. Hi, Phoebe. Thank you so much for joining us. Over to you. Take it away.
Hi, Natalia. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for saying that we'd save the best till last. What a compliment. I love that. Thank you. So you'll hear a bit from me, and then we'll have a little bit of space for Q&A at the end. But I'd love to just tell you a little bit more about myself, and I suppose why I'm here today talking to you. So when people describe growing up surrounded by the joy of nature, I can't relate. When they explain the ways which their family taught them to nurture and to cherish our natural world, I can't relate. When they describe the heartbreak they felt watching the destruction of nature firsthand, I can't relate. Growing up in the climate generation, I've been asking myself, what is my place here? Why am I here? I stand here as a young person, a working class woman who has had to grow up too quickly. I stand here with and for every young person who has ever been called a snowflake while they plead with their parents to be heard. I stand here with the burden of the climate crisis on my shoulders, the baton of hope and inspiration being thrown at my heart. The decision of not wanting to have children buried deep in my soul, the fear of what my future holds. So how did I get here? I grew up in Blackpool. For those of you that aren't from the UK, it's an incredibly urban environment, but by the seaside. I love the sea. We're at the top of so many leadership boards, just all of the bad ones. We're the most economically deprived, the least educated, and have the worst living environment. I didn't grow up as a carefree child, especially not in my teenage years. I grew up with poor mental health, worrying about money. Growing up in the UK meant that I'd never experienced the first-hand effects of the climate crisis. However, I didn't have capacity to worry about it. I grew up with climate privilege without having the privilege to worry about our climate crisis. And yet the natural world was always something that fascinated me. When I was little, my family would visit what I like to call manufactured nature spaces, places where non-native flowers thrived and where grass grew in straight lines. I was always drawn to the wildness and the power that nature held, and I was intrigued with what existed outside of the manicured places that I'd grown up in. So at 18, I managed to break through the ceiling and to study sustainability at university. I was among the first generation in my family to do this, and for a long time, it didn't actually feel like an option for me. Now with it, it felt like my small bubble was suddenly popped. I was able to learn about a brand new world, occupy brand new spaces that I'd never even knew existed. New principles, new ideologies flooded onto me, and I began to learn about life outside of Blackpool. To begin with, we learned about the complexities, the beauty of our planet and our societies, and I began to extend so much love and so much empathy for the world around me. However, what I hadn't anticipated was that this love and my fascination for our natural world would soon move to fear. I started to learn about the scale of our climate and our ecological crisis for the very first time. Now it's difficult to describe the deep and the existential fear, the dread that comes with a lack of security for your future. The feelings of only living for the next 7 years, because that's all the science tells you that you have left. The uncontrollable despair of seeing no action. Now I had days of practicing nothing but hope. The days when I was surrounded by other youth activists doing incredible things all over the world. The days when decision makers invited me into the room, rooms like this. And there were days of sheer sadness. There were the apocalyptic dreams that I so often experienced. The suicidal ideations invoked by a feeling of wanting to give up and of seeing no progress. Now this isn't just me. Recent research surveying 10,000 young people in 10 countries found that 56% of young people felt that humanity was doomed. And 70% of us had experienced eco-anxiety. At age 21, I was already feeling overwhelmed, powerless, and increasingly desolate. I was speaking to my parents, showing them intangible graphs of the rising frequency of large-scale weather events, and I was just pleading with them to believe me. I was going into lectures, being told about the state of our planet, but given no tools to process that information and no space to feel empowered to take action. And after speaking to my classmates, I realized that so many of my peers felt the same. Leaving university, I never felt more eco-anxious. And during my work with business leaders, with policymakers, with those in historic seats of power, the same feelings can be seen in classrooms and in boardrooms alike. I've seen the people in society with the most authority, the most traditional power, grapple with their climate emotions without the knowledge of knowing where to begin. And maybe some of you in this room feel like that. Now there's two pieces to this puzzle. There's the internal work that we must do, the work which enables us to recognize our climate emotions and instead of being overwhelmed by them, feel passion and a drive to take action. It's important to recognize that being anxious in the face of the climate crisis is a completely healthy response to a crisis. is what can light the flame in your heart to take action. If anything, it's less healthy to not feel the sense of urgency and the anxiety around this huge crisis. And this internal work is what can shift you from a place of apathy to a place of empowerment. It involves rewriting the stories that both yourself and that society has told you, that you're too small to make a difference, that the system is too broken to create meaningful change. It involves understanding the power. It involves understanding the power in your spheres of influence, the places where you can make real change, beyond looking at individual action. How can you use your power, your sphere of influence, to constructively disrupt the systems that were never built to serve us? It also involves finding power in your skills. An activist doesn't and shouldn't look one way. An activist isn't just me or the young person banner blazing in the street. It's the CEO advocating for climate action in the boardroom. It's the tech innovator understanding their sphere of influence and using tech as a fundamental tool for climate action. Without doing this work and continuing to attempt climate action is like trying to build a house without its foundations. And the second piece to this puzzle is the external work. As I've said, eco-anxiety is a very healthy response to a crisis. However, so often among young people, our eco-anxiety turns to feelings of powerlessness and feelings of overwhelmed, fueled by inaction, by apathy, and a lack of transparency in the face of this crisis. People in historic seats of power have become experts at tuning out of the scientists and the young people that are screaming that we're hurtling towards a cliff. Leaders are still conforming to broken systems and putting red tape in front of decisions that just aren't that complicated. They're making decisions about our future without hearing us. They're playing with my life like it's an inconvenience and trivializing it to a political talking point. And so often the baton of responsibility is handed to me, to my generation. Yet we know that only 26% of us know how we can meaningfully contribute to climate action. We feel powerless. As young people, we will inherit the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And yet we're systematically excluded from the decisions governing our future. I don't feel seen or heard or cared about, or like I deserve to even be here in the first place. And we need the infrastructure which facilitates and enables this, whether it be youth advisory groups, young professional programs made up of the incredible knowledge and talent within your own organisation, or collaborations with young change makers like me. In the past month, my organisation, Force of Nature, have been working with the young professionals within one of the world's biggest fast-moving consumer goods companies, where we ask them to pose solutions to the problems they see within their own organisation's sustainability agendas. And last week, we took these solutions to the entire C-suite, who were so surprised at the incredible wealth of ideas and knowledge that they had been sitting on within their own young professionals. We need people in these historic seats of power, people just like you, to understand that we deserve to be in decision-making rooms, in rooms which govern our future, and that so often we can tell you what we need to survive this crisis. The depth of morality, our passion, our care is the exact reason we should be in the decision-making room, and why we're being excluded from the design of our own future. Now I want to be vulnerable with you. I want you to be vulnerable with yourself and with people that you're not often vulnerable with, young people like me maybe. Our vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's what we can harness to co-design solutions. My hope for the future is that above all else we can be human. Humans connected by joy and empathy and a just world free from fear. I stand here with the hope of our lived experience being heard. Stand here as an ally, a friend, a leader to older generations, for those in historic seats of power. Now, recently a peer asked me what I would be doing if the world wasn't on fire. And I had to think to myself, what would I be doing if the world wasn't on fire? Now, I have the privilege of working for our planet instead of dying under it, but this took me off guard. I haven't imagined a different life for myself in over 10 years. I haven't stopped to think about the opportunity that my future holds in over 10 years. And I haven't allowed myself to imagine a future where I could be doing anything different for fear of an unattainable world. It's my responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. I just wish that I didn't have to fight so hard to be heard. I wish that I could have become a singer, a baker, an ice cream lady, my very first dream job. And this is the reality that so many young people face. So why am I here? It's a difficult question, but I feel like I finally have the answer. For me, it's the moral obligation I feel to act, fueled by feelings of despair. It's the fear and the resilience which forces me to not only enter the room quietly, but to kick the door down. It's the injustices that I feel which gives me the power to know that I belong in rooms that I've been told that I don't. And it's the hope. It's the hope that I feel which allows me to continue building a future by my own design. So now, imagine you've walked into a room and you notice that someone is missing. Perhaps it's your colleague, it's your peer, it's a guest speaker, but it's someone who is vital to that conversation. It's someone who will be affected by what happens in that room. What do you do? Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Natalia back and maybe we could take some questions if there are any.
Wow, that was so powerful, Phoebe. All right, everyone, we have one question actually, because we're running out of time from the audience for Phoebe. So here we go. Eco-anxiety seems to be more prevalent amongst people who are more aware about the protection of the environment, right? So Phoebe, do you think overemphasis on the ongoing climate change and sustainability agendas are maybe too overemphasized? And also, how do you think the governments and society at large are dealing with this problem of protecting our Earth?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think that our climate crisis is not something to be downplayed. It's not something that is being over-egged in the media. It's not something that we should be shying away from or being ignorant to. It's definitely something that currently mainstream media shows in a pretty unproductive way. So we don't regularly see solutions-focused news or solutions-focused policies or anything like that. Quite often it is all about the doom and gloom. And exactly as I said just a moment ago, so often our eco-anxiety, our feelings of anxiety and fear for the future, they turn into feelings of powerlessness because the media isn't showing us any solutions. The industry leaders aren't creating space for young people to feel empowered to take action and to take real meaningful action. So our feelings tip over into powerlessness. And what happens then is we feel shut down and we have no one that is there to protect our climate and our ecological crisis that is currently happening. So I really don't think that it's being over-egged in any way, shape or form. I think that we can't sugarcoat the issue, but I do think that we need some more solutions-focused media and just in general more collaboration across society, whether it be from young people, from politicians, from industry leaders, from educators. To solve this crisis, we're going to need more collaboration and we're going to need more people, more heads working on this together. So I think that that's more of the issue at the minute rather than how much we're talking about it.
Wonderful, Phoebe. We actually have time for one more question. So looking at the overall disease burden, which includes physical, mental, community health emanating from this climate change effect, which triggers disasters and the psychological effect on people, Phoebe, what do you think could be some of the, interventions at individual level and the health community, at large, once again, and how would they be framed and how can we tackle this situation, in the best case to eliminate this in the future, this problem?
It's a great question again, and I'd say there's two parts to this. And the first part is understanding that sometimes you just need space. There are days where I don't want to get out of bed. There are days where I want to do absolutely nothing to do with the climate crisis. I don't want to even think about it. I'll watch films, Christmas films at the minute. There are days where you just need that space. You need space to rest, to recoup, to manage your own well-being. So that, I think, is the first bit, is just recognizing when you do need that space. But then the other piece is all about, as I mentioned before, being able to shift from this space of apathy or overwhelm into a space of feeling empowered. So there are a few elements to this, and one of the biggest is rewriting the stories that the world has told you and the stories that you tell yourself. So you're too small to make a difference. The system's too broken to create meaningful change. So being able to rewrite those stories, into a space where you can say, yes, I am one person, but I am one person with a network of 8 billion people who are all contributing to this as well. The second thing, again, is what I said earlier, which is around figuring out where your skills lie. So where is my sphere of influence? Where can I contribute beyond individual action? So everybody on this call here, they can take individual action, and that's so meaningful. It's definitely a stepping stone to even greater action. But especially the people on this call, they have the spheres of influence to be able to disrupt the systems that were never built to serve us. You have the power to do that, and you have the skills to do that as well. You're incredibly wise, older people than me, so I know that you have the skill set to do that. And I think the final thing is about finding where your passion lies. What is your problem area? So for me, my problem area is youth representation in the climate crisis, and what that enables you to do by finding that one thing that you can contribute to is take the weight and the burden of the entire climate crisis off your shoulders, and know I'm contributing to youth representation in the climate crisis, and someone else is going to think about this other thing, and someone else is going to think about this other thing, and all together we're going to create a story and a picture where all of us are contributing to real, meaningful, institutional and systemic change.
Wonderful, very interesting and very powerful manifesto, and thank you so much, Phoebe, for sharing this very valuable insights. So that brings us to the close of yet another successful edition of Zinnov Confluence 2021, Europe edition. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to summarize the last 2.5 hours. So we know we have 5 key challenges to be answered to achieve the target of net zero and to address 51 billion tons of annual emissions of greenhouse gases. And these are how we make things, how we plug in, how we grow things, how we get around, how we live. We also talked about 6 ways to lower green premiums, which are innovation, digitalization, green finance, circularity, regulations, and of course, behavioral change. 5 key parameters that are impacting sustainability, as we saw, are skilled workforce availability, tech maturity, private and public investments, supportive government policy frameworks, and awareness amongst customers, very important. And these workforce reskilling with digital sustainable skills is found to be the key barrier across geographies. Also, we talked about enabling foundation for communication in 2030, and these ways are through connecting physical, biological, and digital worlds with sustainability impact. We discovered that 6G will foster sustainability impact in 2030, and CO2 reducing emissions journey will start with 5G, and then this will continue on in the future. And the most pressing issue at hand, folks, is to shift the perspective towards how digitalization can help in working towards decarbonization rather than becoming a threat. As we know, people across industries and, of course, political leaders can co-create and co-design solutions to address the climate crisis, and youth representation, like we saw in Phoebe, in decision-making rooms, is very important to achieve net zero future. So, folks, this has been a very enlightening day of timely and pertinent sessions that have left us all with a lot of food for thought, hopefully, that can help us chart our business strategies with sustainability front and center. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for this Europe edition of Zinnov Confluence, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. For now, though, that's a wrap from us here at Zinnov. This is Natalia Bilbao, your host, signing off. So, folks, thank you so much. Stay safe, take care, and once again, thank you so much for joining us.